The alarm systems screamed across every communication channel in the Galactic Assembly headquarters. Delegate Velthor rushed into the emergency chamber, his 3 eyes wide with concern. Around him, representatives from 40 different species took their seats, their faces showing confusion and fear. Nobody had heard this particular alarm in over 2,000 years. "What is happening?" demanded Krell Commander Vosh, his scaled hands gripping the edge of his console. The old warnings should not activate anymore. Velthor pulled up the display that floated above the center of the chamber. A 3-dimensional map of known space rotated slowly, and there, on the edge of Sector 7 Gamma, a bright red warning flashed. The entire chamber fell silent. Sector 7 Gamma was the quarantine zone, a region of space that had been forbidden since before most current civilizations had discovered fire. "Something is coming out," whispered the Kryn sensor technician, her antenna trembling. "Energy signatures. A ship. No, multiple ships. They are crossing the boundary." This was impossible. The quarantine zone was death itself. Radiation storms that could melt steel in seconds. Spatial rifts that tore matter apart at the atomic level. Gravitational anomalies that crushed anything larger than a pebble. The Assembly had lost 17 research vessels trying to study the zone's edge. Nothing living could exist inside that nightmare, let alone build ships and fly them out. The main view screen activated, showing a vessel unlike anything in the Assembly's extensive databases. It was massive, perhaps 3 kilometers long, with a hull that seemed to shimmer with patterns of energy. The design was strange, angular in some places and curved in others, as if built by someone who understood physics differently than the rest of the galaxy. "This is Captain Minho of the Earth vessel Taiguk Pioneer," a voice said in perfect Assembly standard, though the accent was unusual. "We are transmitting friendship protocols and request permission to approach for peaceful contact." Earth. The word meant nothing to anyone in the chamber. The database searches came back empty. No record of this species. No record of this vessel design. No record of anything called Earth. "How are you speaking our language?" Velthor asked, his voice carefully controlled despite his racing hearts. "We have been listening to your broadcasts for 300 of our years," the human captain replied. "We learned your languages, studied your cultures, and waited until we were ready for this meeting. We come in peace, but we understand you will have many questions." The view screen shifted to show the interior of the human ship. A man sat in what appeared to be a command chair, wearing a uniform of dark blue with strange symbols. His skin was a light brown color, his hair dark and short, and his face showed no obvious fear despite emerging from the most dangerous region of known space. Behind him, other humans worked at stations that glowed with soft light. "I am Ambassador Velthor of the Galactic Assembly," he said, trying to follow proper first contact procedures, even though nothing about this situation was proper. "You say you come from inside Sector 7 Gamma. This is not possible. That region has been quarantined for over 2,000 galactic cycles. Nothing can survive there." Captain Minho smiled, and somehow that expression made Velthor more nervous. "Ambassador, our people have lived in what you call Sector 7 Gamma for our entire history. We call it home. We did not know it was supposed to kill us." A woman appeared on screen next to the captain. She wore a white coat and held a data tablet. "I am Dr. Yunji," she said. "I have prepared a complete data package about our species, our history, and our world. With your permission, I will transmit it to your systems. I believe you will find it very interesting." Velthor authorized the transmission, though he kept the data isolated from main systems in case it contained threats. The information began flowing through, and across the chamber, delegates started reading on their personal displays. The room filled with gasps and sounds of disbelief. Humans had evolved on a planet called Earth, located deep within the quarantine zone. Their civilization had grown from primitive tribes to spacefaring culture over 10,000 years, all within the radiation and chaos that the assembly considered instantly fatal. The data showed cities built on worlds that sensor readings said should be uninhabitable. It showed humans walking on surfaces where radiation levels would kill a Kryn in 30 seconds. It showed children playing in areas where spatial anomalies twisted light itself. "This is a trick," Commander Vosh declared, standing from his seat. "Some kind of elaborate deception. Nothing lives in the quarantine zone." "We do," said Captain Minho simply. "We always have. We did not know it was special until we developed our own long-range sensors about 500 years ago. We detected your civilizations, your ships, your communications. We realized that you avoided our region of space. We studied why. We learned that you considered our home to be a place of death." Dr. Yunji brought up images on the screen. "This is Earth," she said, showing a blue and green planet that looked deceptively peaceful. "Population 12 billion. This is Mars, our first colony. Population 2 billion. This is Titan. This is Europa. This is New Sol. We have colonized 47 worlds within what you call the quarantine zone. We have a total population of 38 billion humans." The chamber erupted in chaos. 38 billion. Living in hell. Thriving in conditions that the galaxy's best scientists said were incompatible with life. The implications were staggering and terrifying. Velther raised his hand for silence. "Captain Minho, Dr. Yunji, on behalf of the Galactic Assembly, I welcome you to First Contact. However, you must understand that we need time to verify your claims and understand how this is possible." "We understand completely," Minho said. "We have waited 300 years for this conversation. We can wait a little longer. We will remain at the boundary zone. Send your scientists, send your observers. We have nothing to hide." The transmission ended, and the human ship held position just outside the quarantine zone boundary. Velther looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of the galaxy's most powerful species. They had just discovered that the most dangerous place in known space was home to billions of beings who considered it normal. The galaxy would never be the same. The assembly research station near the quarantine zone boundary had never seen so much activity. Ships from 24 species arrived daily, carrying scientists desperate to study the humans. Captain Minho had agreed to allow small delegations aboard the Taiguk Pioneer, and what they discovered challenged everything they thought they knew about biology and physics. Velther stood in the observation room, watching through a transparent wall as a human demonstrated something that made his blood run cold. The human's name was Do Yun, a young man barely into adulthood by his species standards. He wore casual clothing and had an easy smile that seemed wrong given what he was doing. "This is a standard power converter," Do Yun explained, holding up a device the size of his hand. "We use them in everything from personal communicators to small vehicles." He walked to the edge of the safe zone, where warning lights flashed and radiation detectors screamed. Then, with no protective equipment whatsoever, he stepped across the line into the quarantine zone itself. Every scientist in the observation room gasped. The Kryn medical officer started to shout a warning, but stopped when nothing happened. Do Hyun held the device up into a stream of radiation that monitors showed would kill most species in under a minute. The device began to glow softly. "The converter takes the ambient energy and transforms it into usable power," he said, his voice clear despite the interference. "We use the zone's natural radiation the same way you might use solar panels. It is free energy, available everywhere in our space." He walked back into the safe zone, completely unharmed, and handed the now charged device to a Kryn physicist who handled it with thick protective gloves. The physicist's hands shook as he scanned it. The power reading was off the charts. "How long can you survive in the zone?" asked Dr. Venakara, a renowned xenobiologist. Do-Yoon shrugged. "Without a suit? Maybe 6 or 7 hours before I start feeling sick. With a basic suit, weeks. With a full protection suit, indefinitely." But that was just at the boundary. The deeper parts are more dangerous. There, you need better equipment. More dangerous. He spoke of places that were more dangerous than an area that would kill most galactic species in seconds. And humans needed equipment for those places the same way others might need a jacket for cold weather. The assembly sent medical teams next. What they discovered about human biology would fill textbooks and give nightmares for generations. In the medical bay of the Taeguk Pioneer, a human doctor named Ji-won welcomed them with disturbing cheerfulness. "Please understand that our biology is adapted to our environment," Ji-won explained. "We are probably very different from what you are used to." That was an understatement of cosmic proportions. The medical scans showed that humans had redundant systems for nearly every major organ. 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, a heart with 4 chambers, and a liver that could regenerate itself if damaged. Their bone density was 3 times higher than species of similar size. Their cellular structure included repair mechanisms that activated automatically when damage occurred. "This scarring," said Dr. Venakara, pointing to marks on Ji-won's arm. "What caused this?" "Training accident when I was 15, Ji-won said. "I was learning to repair hull breaches and got caught in a plasma vent. Burns covered 40% of my body." The medical team stared. 40% burns were fatal to most species, even with immediate treatment. "How long was your recovery?" Dr. Venakara asked quietly. "Hospital for 2 weeks, physical therapy for a month," Ji-won replied. "I have full function now, see?" She flexed her arm, showing no limitation in movement. The scans also revealed something else disturbing. Humans had trace amounts of heavy metals and radioactive isotopes in their bodies that would poison other species. But in humans, these substances were integrated into their cellular function. Evolution had not just taught them to survive radiation, it had taught them to use it. A cultural liaison named Hai Jin arrived to explain human development to increasingly nervous delegates. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an easy manner that somehow made the terrible facts she shared seem normal. "Our technology developed differently than yours," she explained, showing holographic images of human history. "You had safe planets and gentle environments. You could experiment slowly and carefully. We did not have that luxury. Everything in our space wants to kill us, so our technology had to work in those conditions from the beginning." She showed images of early human spacecraft. They looked crude and brutal, with heavy shielding and redundant systems everywhere. "Our first ships had a 30% failure rate," Hyjin said. "But we learned. We adapted. Now our ships are the only ones that can safely travel through the deep zones." "The deep zones?" Velther asked. "The areas of highest radiation and spatial instability," Hyjin explained. "They connect different parts of human space. We use them like highways. A journey that would take you 6 months going around the zone takes us 3 weeks going through it." She pulled up another image, showing human children in what appeared to be a classroom. They were young, perhaps 6 or 7 standard years old. On the wall behind them was a chart showing radiation levels and exposure times. The children were learning to read radiation the way other species' children learn to read weather. "We teach safety from early age," Hyjin said. "Every human child knows how to check radiation levels, how to seal a room against spatial rifts, how to recognize the warning signs of gravitational anomalies. It is basic education, like learning to count or read." Commander Vosh watched all of this with growing alarm. "Your entire species is adapted for war," he said bluntly. "You are living weapons." Hyjin's smile faded. No, Commander. We are adapted for survival. There's a difference. We did not choose to evolve in a death zone. We simply lived through it. We are not warriors by nature. We are survivors by necessity. But Velther could see the fear in the other delegates' eyes. They were not comforted. A species that could survive the quarantine zone could survive anything. A species that used deadly radiation as a power source could weaponize it easily. A species with redundant organs and cellular regeneration could sustain losses in conflict that would break other civilizations. The humans had not meant to be terrifying. They had simply adapted to their environment. But to the rest of the galaxy, which had evolved in safety and comfort, humanity was a nightmare come to life. They were proof that the universe could forge something far more dangerous than any weapon, and they had emerged from their crucible ready to join the wider galaxy, whether the galaxy was ready for them or not. The Assembly convened a special historical committee to understand humanity's past. Captain Minho had offered complete access to human records, and what the committee discovered was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. The humans had not simply survived in the quarantine zone. They had built civilizations, fought wars, reached for the stars, and done it all while the galaxy remained completely unaware of their existence. Taejin was the human chosen to present their history. He was a middle-aged man with gray touching his dark hair, wearing simple clothes and carrying a genuine enthusiasm for his subject. He stood before the committee in a presentation chamber, surrounded by holographic displays that would show Earth's story. Our recorded history begins about 12,000 years ago, Taejin explained, when our ancestors started farming in a river valley. Before that, we have archaeological evidence going back hundreds of thousands of years, showing our evolution from simpler forms. He showed images of early human civilizations. Mud brick cities, stone temples, primitive writing on clay tablets. It looked like the early history of a dozen other species. Normal, understandable. We developed slowly at first, Taejin continued. We built cities, created art, fought wars over resources and beliefs. We invented writing, mathematics, philosophy. For thousands of years, we did not know that our world was unusual. The hologram shifted to show different regions of Earth. Forests, deserts, oceans, mountains. It looked beautiful and peaceful. Nothing like the horror zone the Assembly imagined. Earth sits in a relatively stable pocket within the quarantine zone, Taejin explained. The radiation levels are high, but not immediately lethal. We evolved to handle them naturally. We did not know we were unusual until much later. Velther watched as human history unfolded. The rise and fall of empires, the spread of religions, the advancement of science. Humans had discovered fire, then metals, then gunpowder, then electricity, following a path similar to other species. But then the images showed something that made the committee members shift uncomfortably. About 300 years ago, we split the atom, Taejin said quietly. We learned to harness nuclear reactions. And then we built weapons. The hologram showed mushroom clouds rising over cities. Destruction on a massive scale. The humans had weaponized the very forces that filled their home region naturally. We nearly destroyed ourselves, Taejin admitted. We built enough weapons to make Earth uninhabitable. Nations threatened each other with total annihilation. For 50 years, we lived under the shadow of potential extinction. And then something changed. The hologram shifted to show a large building with flags from different nations. We called it the Great Unification, Taejin said. Not a world government, but a commitment to cooperation over destruction. We agreed to reduce our weapons, to share technology, to explore space together instead of fighting over Earth. It was not easy. It took decades. But we chose survival over pride. Commander Vosh leaned forward. You had weapons that could destroy your world, and you chose not to use them? Yes, Taejin said simply. We came very close several times. Leaders made threats. Accidents almost triggered exchanges. But at each critical moment, someone chose peace. We learned that survival required cooperation. The hologram showed human space stations, then bases on their moon, then settlements on Mars. The expansion looked slow and difficult, with many failures and disasters. But humans kept trying. Our early space program lost many people, Taejin said. Radiation exposure, equipment failures, accidents. We did not know that other species would find our home region impossible. To us, space was just dangerous, the way ocean voyages were dangerous to our ancestors. We learned by doing, and we paid the price in lives. What disturbed the committee most came next. Taejun showed a timeline of human technological development alongside assembly radio transmissions that humans had detected. 297 years ago, we detected your first signals, Taejin explained. Radio waves that did not come from Earth or our colonies. We were excited. We thought we were about to meet neighbors. But as we studied the signals and learned your languages, we realized something strange. You never came to our region of space. You avoided it completely. The hologram showed human scientists studying star charts, comparing their maps with assembly navigation data. We did not understand at first, Taejun continued. Then, we built better sensors and mapped the radiation patterns of our region. We compared them to your safety standards. And we realized that what was normal to us was deadly to you. We lived in what you considered a quarantine zone. Valther felt a chill. You knew about us for 300 years and said nothing? We were not ready, Taejin replied. We were still one planet and a few small colonies. You had hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. We feared that if we revealed ourselves too early, you might see us as a threat, or as curiosities to be studied and controlled. So we watched and learned and grew stronger. We studied your languages, your cultures, your politics. We prepared for this meeting. A Kryn delegate stood abruptly. You spied on us for 3 centuries. We observed, Taejun corrected gently. Your transmissions were public. We simply listened. And we made sure we understood you before we introduced ourselves. Would you have done differently? The chamber fell silent. Probably not. Any species discovering they were weaker than their neighbors would be cautious. Taejun continued the presentation, showing the expansion of human civilization within the quarantine zone. 47 colonized worlds. Hundreds of space stations. A thriving interplanetary culture that had grown while the assembly remained completely ignorant. We developed our own art, literature, music, philosophy, Taejun said, showing images of human culture. We had our own wars and made our own peace. We struggled with the same questions about meaning and purpose that all thinking beings face. We are not so different from you, despite our unusual home. But as the presentation ended, Valther knew that was not quite true. Humans were different in ways that mattered. They had grown up in isolation, in danger, in an environment that would kill most of the galaxy. They had learned to survive without help, without guidance, without even knowing that easier places existed. And now they were here, ready to join the galactic community. Not as primitives seeking help, but as equals who had already conquered the worst challenge space could offer. They had not asked for permission to emerge from the zone. They had simply decided they were ready and done it. The question that haunted Valther as the presentation ended was simple and terrifying. What else were humans capable of? The diplomatic situation deteriorated quickly. What had begun as scientific curiosity turned into political maneuvering as various assembly factions realized the implications of humanity's existence. Some species saw opportunity. Others saw threat. The Krell Dominion saw both. Commander Vosh stood before the Assembly Council, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. "We must establish control before this situation becomes dangerous," he declared. "These humans have advanced technology, unusual adaptations, and no oversight. They must submit to assembly regulations or return to their isolation." Captain Minho sat in the visitors' gallery, listening calmly. Velthor had warned him this would happen. Some species would try to assert dominance, to put humans in their place before they could become too powerful. It was predictable politics. When Vash finished his speech, Minho requested permission to address the council. Velthor granted it, curious to see how the human would respond. "Commander Vash raises valid concerns," Minho said, standing before the assembled delegates. "You do not know us well yet. You are uncertain about our intentions and capabilities. This is reasonable. But we will not submit to being controlled or caged. We are a free people, and we will remain so." Vash's eyes narrowed. "You think you can stand against the assembled might of 40 species? You are one people in an isolated region." "We are one people who survived what killed your research teams," Minho replied quietly. "We are not threatening anyone, Commander. But we will not be threatened either." The tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut. Velthor saw several delegates reaching for their communication devices, ready to call in military support if needed. This could turn into a disaster quickly. Minho seemed to sense it too. "Perhaps a demonstration would help," he suggested. "Not of military force, but of capability. You need to understand what humans can do before you make decisions about us. I invite any interested parties to send observers to witness a routine operation in human space." "What kind of operation?" Velthor asked. "Survey and mapping," Minho said. "We are charting a new route through a deep zone region. It is standard work for us, but it might help you understand how we function in our environment." Commander Vash agreed immediately, seeing an opportunity to gather intelligence. 12 other species sent observers as well. Velthor went personally, his curiosity overriding his caution. The observation ship followed the human vessel into the quarantine zone. Every sensor screamed warnings. Radiation levels climbed to lethal ranges. Spatial distortions twisted the stars. Gravitational readings made no sense. The observation ship's eye suggested immediate retreat 3 times in the first hour. Ahead of them, the human ship moved steadily forward, its shields glowing softly, but not showing any signs of stress. A small shuttle detached from the larger vessel and dove toward a swirling anomaly that looked like space itself was tearing apart. The pilot was Sunwoo, a young man barely 20 standard years old. His voice came across the communication channel, calm and professional. "Beginning survey run. Estimated time 15 minutes. Radiation levels are moderate for this region. Spatial stability is at 72%. All within normal parameters." Normal parameters. The readings that the observation ship's computer said were instantly fatal, were normal to this human pilot. Velthor watched in horror as the small shuttle entered the anomaly. The visual feed showed reality itself bending around the craft. Colors that should not exist swirled past the viewports. The shuttle's hull glowed with energy discharge. And through it all, Sunwoo hummed a tune and typed notes into his computer. "Interesting convergence point at Mark 7, Sunwoo reported. "Looks like we can route through here if we adjust for the gravitational gradient." Marking it on the chart now. 15 minutes later, the shuttle emerged from the other side of the anomaly, completely undamaged. Sunwoo transmitted his survey data to the main ship and began flying back. "Daily operation complete," he reported cheerfully. "Ready for the next assignment." The observers sat in stunned silence. What they had just witnessed should have been impossible. The human had flown through an anomaly that physics said would destroy any ship, mapped it like someone taking notes in a park, and emerged ready to do it again. But the demonstration was not over. Captain Minho invited the observers aboard the Tygok Pioneer for a briefing. In a conference room, a woman named Bora waited for them. She wore a military-style uniform and had the bearing of someone who had seen combat. "I am Defense Coordinator Bora," she introduced herself. "Captain Minho asked me to explain our defensive capabilities, since there have been concerns about humanity's military status." She activated a holographic display, showing the quarantine zone. Human space contains 47 colonized worlds and 312 permanent installations. We have a population of 38 billion. We maintain a defensive fleet of approximately 8,000 ships of various sizes. Commander Vosh leaned forward. 8,000 ships is not enough to threaten the assembly. Our ships are not designed to threaten the assembly, Bora replied. They are designed to operate in conditions that would destroy your ships. In open space, outside the zone, your vessels are probably superior. But in our space, our ships are optimized for the environment. She changed the display to show weapon systems. Our primary defensive strategy relies on the zone itself. We have mapped every stable route through human space. We know every anomaly, every radiation storm, every gravitational fluctuation. If we were attacked, we would simply fall back to defensive positions in the deep zones and force any aggressor to follow us into conditions they cannot survive. The implications hit the observers like cold water. Humans would not fight battles in open space where other species had advantages. They would retreat into the nightmare zones they called home and force their enemies to follow them into hell. Additionally, Bora continued, we have developed weapons that harness the zone's natural phenomena. Radiation projectors, spatial disruptors, gravitational anchors. These weapons are useless outside the zone, but inside it, they are devastating. We designed them to fight each other during our wars before the Great Unification. We have not used them in combat for over 100 years. We prefer not to use them ever again. She paused, letting that sink in. But we have them, and we know how to use them. More importantly, we know how to survive their use. We have built our cities, our ships, our entire civilization to withstand weapons that weaponize our environment. Valthar understood the message. Humans were not threatening anyone, but they were making it clear that threatening them would be suicide. Any species that attacked human space would have to fight in conditions that humans were born to survive, and that would kill the attackers. We do not want war, Bora said firmly. We want peace and cooperation. We have much to offer the galactic community and much to learn from you. But we will defend ourselves if necessary, and we have advantages in our home territory that no other species can match. She deactivated the display. We are survivors, not conquerors. We hope you understand the difference. The observers returned to the assembly with a new perspective. Humanity could not be controlled through force. They could not be intimidated or caged. They had to be accepted as equals, or the alternative was a conflict that nobody wanted. Commander Vosh never made another speech demanding human submission. He had seen what routine human operations looked like, and he had no desire to see what human defensive operations would be. The message was clear. Humans were joining the galaxy on their own terms, and the galaxy would have to adjust. The assembly chambers had never been so full. Representatives from every member species crowded into the hall, along with observers from a dozen non-member civilizations who had heard about the human situation. The vote on humanity's petition for membership would determine the future of galactic politics. Valthar stood at his podium, looking out over the assembled delegates. In 3 months, the humans had changed everything. They had challenged assumptions about biology, physics, and survival itself. They had proven that intelligence could thrive in places the galaxy considered uninhabitable. And now the assembly had to decide how to respond. We have a choice before us, Valthar began. We can welcome humanity as full members of our community, or we can deny them and hope they remain isolated in their region of space. But let us be honest with ourselves. This is not really a choice at all. He gestured to the displays showing human space. Humanity exists whether we acknowledge them or not. They have 38 billion citizens, 47 worlds, and technology we are only beginning to understand. They do not need our permission to thrive. The only question is whether we will benefit from cooperation or suffer from opposition. Commander Vosh stood, his posture less aggressive than before. Ambassador Velther speaks truth. I have seen human capabilities. I believe membership is the only logical choice. But we must establish clear boundaries. Human space must remain separate, with restricted access. We cannot have our citizens accidentally flying into death zones. Captain Minho sat in the petitioner's area, listening carefully. He knew this moment would determine how humans fit into the larger galaxy. Beside him, Dr. Yunji reviewed data on her tablet, preparing for questions. A delegate from the Peaceful Lyrian Collective stood next. I support membership, but I have concerns. The humans have kept secrets from us for 300 years. How can we trust them now? Velther looked to Minho, giving him permission to respond. The human captain stood, his expression calm but serious. Trust must be earned on both sides, Minho said. We watched you in secret because we feared contact too early would put us at a disadvantage. We were few and you were many. We were isolated and you controlled the wider galaxy. We wanted to understand you before we revealed ourselves. Perhaps that was wrong, but it came from caution, not malice. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But now we ask for the truth from you as well. Dr. Yunji has discovered something in our research of the quarantine zone, something the Assembly has not told us. Yunji stood, activating a holographic display. We have studied the radiation patterns in our region extensively. The distribution is not natural. The isotope ratios are wrong. The spatial damage is too organized. About 8,000 years ago, something artificial created the quarantine zone. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted denials, demands, accusations. Velther's heart sank. He had hoped this would not come out, at least not yet. Yunji continued over the noise. It was a weapon. A massive weapon deployed during a war. The records have been erased, but the evidence remains in the zone itself. Someone created our nightmarement deliberately, probably to destroy an enemy. And then the galaxy decided to forget it happened. She showed detailed analysis, comparing weapon signatures to the zone's characteristics. The evidence was compelling, undeniable. Who? Minho asked quietly. Which species built a weapon that could sterilize entire star systems? And why has the Assembly hidden this? Velther closed his eyes briefly, then spoke. It was before the current Assembly was formed. Before most of our civilizations achieved spaceflight. The founders of the Assembly, the first species to achieve faster than light travel, fought wars we can barely imagine. They had weapons we no longer understand. And yes, one of those weapons created your quarantine zone. He looked directly at Minho. The founders made an agreement. They would destroy their terrible weapons and hide the evidence of their wars. They would create the Assembly as a place of peace and cooperation. The quarantine zone was sealed and forbidden, partly because it was dangerous, but also because it was a reminder of shameful history. And humans evolved in the aftermath of that weapon, Unji said. We are the children of someone else's war crime. The chamber fell silent. The weight of that revelation settled over everyone present. Humanity had not chosen to live in a nightmare. They had been forced to adapt or die because ancient civilizations had turned their home into a weapons testing ground. Minho walked to the center of the chamber, addressing all the delegates. We did not ask for this meeting to assign blame for ancient history. We came here to ask a simple question. Do you want us as partners or as strangers? We have survived the worst environment in known space, he continued. We have built a civilization that thrives where yours would fail. We have technology adapted to extreme conditions. We have knowledge of phenomena you have never studied. We can offer much to the galactic community. But we can also remain separate, Minho said. We can stay in our space, develop our own civilization, and have minimal contact with yours. We survived 8,000 years without you. We can survive 8,000 more. He paused, letting that sink in. The choice is yours. Accept us as full members with equal rights and mutual respect, or reject us, and we will politely go home and close our borders. We will not beg for acceptance, and we will not submit to being controlled. Velthor admired the humans' approach. No threats, but a clear alternative. Humans would not force their way into the assembly, but they would not be grateful supplicants either. The vote took 3 days of debate. Species argued about security, about integration, about the revelation of ancient wars. But in the end, pragmatism won. Humanity offered too much potential benefit and posed too much potential danger if left isolated and possibly resentful. The final vote was 73 in favor, 12 against, and 8 abstentions. Humanity would join the Galactic Assembly as a full-member species with all rights and responsibilities. But there were conditions. Human space would be officially redesignated as the human territories, with restricted access requiring special permits. Humans would help establish safe routes through the outer regions of their space for assembly ships. Joint research projects would study human adaptations and technologies. And both sides would work to understand the truth about the ancient weapon that had shaped human evolution. When the vote was announced, Minho did not celebrate. He simply nodded and shook hands with various delegates in the traditional human manner. Velthor noticed that some species found the physical contact uncomfortable, but most adapted. They would have to get used to much more than handshakes. A month later, Velthor attended the official ceremony where humanity was welcomed into the assembly. The human delegation included not just diplomats and scientists, but artists, teachers, engineers, and ordinary citizens. They wanted the galaxy to see them as complete people, not just as survivors or curiosities. A cultural representative named Hai Jin gave the final speech of the ceremony. She stood before the gathered delegates, wearing traditional clothing from Earth, and spoke with quiet intensity. "We grew up in your nightmare," she said. "We learned to walk in radiation that would kill you. We learned to navigate spatial rifts and gravitational storms. We learned to survive what was meant to destroy all life. Your ancient war created our home, and we made peace with it." She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes from dozens of different species. "Now we join you not as victims, but as equals. Not as warnings of what happens in forbidden zones, but as proof that life adapts and endures and overcomes. We bring our strength and our resilience and our knowledge gained from surviving the impossible. We ask only that you see us clearly," Hyjin finished. "We are not monsters. We are not weapons. We are people who learn to dream in the dark and build in the ruins and find hope where you saw only death. Welcome us for what we are, survivors who choose to be builders. Partners who were forged in fire and now offer our hands in peace." The chamber was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. Not all of it was enthusiastic, but it was genuine. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had emerged from isolation, and nothing would be the same. Velthor watched Minho and Hyjin leave the chamber with their delegation, heading back to the Taigok Pioneer for the journey home. They would return, of course. Humanity was part of the galactic community now. But first they would tell their people that they had been accepted, that the long isolation was overdone as the human ship departed. Velthor wondered what the future would hold. Humanity had survived the galaxy's worst nightmare and emerged stronger for it. What would they accomplish now that they had access to the wider universe? What would they teach the Assembly, and what would they learn? One thing was certain. The galaxy had just become much more interesting and much less predictable. The children of the quarantine zone had come home, and the universe would never underestimate them again.